Retirees are top targets for cyber criminals, and it's not just phishing emails or fake tech support calls anymore. In today's episode, we'll share an attempted security breach of one of our clients and ways you can protect yourself in today's digital world.
Back on Retire Smarter for another episode. I'm Walter Storholt alongside Tyler Emrick. He is a certified financial planner as well as a chartered financial analyst and, of course, a wealth advisor at True Wealth Design. Wherever you are, you can check us out online by going to truewealthdesign.com. You can book a call, have questions answered, and check out more information and resources there as well from Tyler and, of course, the whole team over at True Wealth Design. Great topic today, Tyler, and I'm looking forward to diving into this one about cybersecurity because these threats are real, and I feel like more and more people are probably starting to know someone who is going through this or has gone through it or has been, caught in some sort of these traps of maybe varying levels of severity, but it's hitting all of us. I'm telling you what, man, I get like 30 calls a day right now that all of them say probable spam. This thing just rings off the hook with spam calls.
Nope, absolutely. I think I could be in that camp as well. Hey, yes. I'll add it to the text camp too. I've gotten a few texts that have made me second guess where I've got to go to the internet and double check and be like, is this a scam? What is this? Is this real? The easy pass is always trying to get me. Every time. Yes. Yeah. So they've definitely ratcheted up. And I can imagine in the world that we live in today with, tech increasing and large language models and AI, what it could potentially get to and how serious that we got to take it. So,
well, they used to have really bad grammar, so it was easy to spot it, but I guess they could use AI to fix some of their grammar issues these days and make it a little bit harder.
Oh, absolutely. Or if there's enough, recordings out there, your voice or whatever, it's amazing what we can do now from a tech standpoint. So I can imagine that this is probably not going to go away. And thus, we've had some recent experiences that I think of lend itself. It kind of propped us up to be like, well, hey, let's do a podcast topic about it. Our clients are getting impacted. I'll share a pretty tight story about really what kind of prompted this whole podcast, and then we'll kind of touch on things that families I think can be aware of and some good practices just to make sure that you keep yourself as protected as possible.
That sounds like a great plan. I'm looking forward to diving in, and let's do it because this is not just your typical cybersecurity episode or content. You're coming to this with some real life examples, which I think adds a lot of flavor and it really drives it home for a lot of us who may be concerned about this. Sure.
Yeah. And we touched on it a little bit, but the statistics are pretty wild to think about. The FBI came out and said there was like 3.4 billion lost in 2023, due to some type of fraud situation for individuals that are 60 and over. So over 3 billion lost.
Just for 60 and over.
Yep. 60 and over. Yeah. The average victim, I think, lost just over 30 grand in 2023 due to the criminals.
That's life-changing money for a lot of people. So that's really unfortunate.
It is, yeah. And specifically, you think about our world with investments and money management and things like that. Just over $1 billion of it was due to investment scams. We have I think I alluded to it a little bit in the opening, the phishing emails. We talk about the texting emails and that type of stuff. There's a whole host of ways that, these scams can play out and work and potentially affect you. But the investment scams specifically were the biggest piece of those losses. So it really hits at home. And certainly something that, from a firm standpoint, we pay quite a bit of attention to and are always doing training on, to try to make sure that we're staying on top of best practices and what individuals and families need to be aware of. Because
what's the difference, Tyler, between an investment scam and these phishing or the other types of scams? Is there something that when I get a text that says, "Hey, your crypto account password has been compromised. Log in here to reset it," it's like, wait a second, hold on.
Correct. Yes.
Is that an investment scam?
Yes. And then So the other side of that would be they call them grandma text scams, where you get a text from a family member, or they say they're a family member and they're in trouble and they need some help. Certainly the tech issue where they kind of remote into your computer was another big one, where you might have some tech issues, or you get an alert that you need to change a password and you click on a spoof site or something like that. And then they gain access to your computer and get in through that was another big one as well. But
So investment scam just meaning it involves an investment account that they're
getting into their
getting
investment
money
accounts.
from.
Yep, absolutely.
Versus you sending a wire transfer for some of those other types of things.
Correct, which is kind of in line with, I guess, kind of, like I said, what kind of prompted the podcast today and the story. We'll kind of start out with it, but what happened with the family that we were working with and how we got involved was we actually had got a call from the client requesting a distribution. Now, Walt, as you can imagine, this is not an uncommon occurrence
Sure.
by any means.
Seems reasonable.
Yes, absolutely. And but the individual and the team member that took the call was great. When she actually got off the call, she came to us and was like, "Hey, the call is really just." This didn't sit well with me. And I think someone's, got our client's information, and she began to share, some of what we would call like red flags, that we are kind of trained and taught to just be on the lookout for. The first of which is that, she said it didn't sound like the client at all when they called in. And the individual actually mispronounced their last name. So, I think you get that when you work with maybe a smaller firm. Our clients run into our many team members over the course of working with us, and certainly develop relationships, especially the individuals that are answering our phone calls and talking to our clients over the phone. That happens quite frequently, and so she was certainly able to pick up the fact that it didn't sound like the client, and then of course mispronouncing the last name. Quite a big red flag there,
sure.
For sure. But aside from that, when they requested the distribution, they actually said, and we'll provide banking information on where to send the assets. And this one is, this is like your prototypical red flag. And the reason for that is a lot of times when you work with an advisor or you set up an account, you're actually setting up your banking information, when you set up that account, right? You're linking your checking account or your savings account to your investment account.
No need to really provide it again.
Correct. Now, are there extenuating circumstances? Sure. Think of like a one-time bank wire for closing on a house or something like that. Those are common. Those are typical. Certainly, there's a little bit of more stringent review on our part when we do that. But for a typical distribution, hey, for the vast majority of our families, those accounts are already linked. There would be no reason or no need to potentially set up a new bank unless, something happened with your checking account or whatever, which is, something the advisor a lot of times would know about or whatever. So just very, very uncommon, right? So we agreed with her, and we're like, yes, let's, maybe take a little bit of deeper dive here and not take it at face value. So we had another team member actually call back and verify the distribution. Now, this happens quite frequently just in our processes, where when you do request a distribution, especially through like email, because a lot of times it's just easy to, hey, pop over an email. I need a quick distribution from an account or whatever. We'll follow up with a phone call to get a verbal confirmation on that. So it's not an uncommon practice, and certainly something we wanted to do in the situation with some of these red flags that
you don't want something lost in translation.
You got it, right? So when we called, we didn't get a hold of them. We left a voicemail, and then we got an actual call back from the client. And this was another individual on our team that took this call and actually asked some more verifying questions. We're like, okay, date of birth, social security number, some of your typical verifiers. And the individual was actually able to pass those verification data points, so date of birth, social security, but they still didn't sound like our client, and they still mispronounced their last name. Two pretty big red flags that we were worried of before. So, as you can imagine, if those weren't there, maybe you work with a big brokerage house or something like that, and you don't have maybe that connection, or you've talked to an individual, it can be a little easier for those scam artists to kind of call back in. Now, of course, those companies have processes in place to catch that and try to help and so on and so forth. But for us, it was really leaning on knowing the family and knowing the client. So we took that second call, and we came back and we're kind of digesting. And over the course of these calls, it happened over a 2-day period. We actually got a third kind of red flag that came in where the client, overnight, we came into an email from the custodian saying that the client had actually sold out of some investments inside of their accounts, which again, it's very uncommon with the way that we work with our families. A lot of times we're managing those assets for families and making those buys and sells and deciding on, which investment gets sold out to do the distribution, and because there's some thought and some planning that goes on with that. So very rarely, almost never, does a client log into like the actual custodian where the assets are held and place a trade to get a distribution out of the account. So,
Sure.
We were almost very confident that this was a fraud situation at that point. So we were able to have the actual advisor who worked with the family on an ongoing, year in and year out basis actually make a call out to another family member to kind of verify the situation. And sure enough, it was fraud. So what had happened is somehow the fraudster actually got complete access to the client's phone. So that way, when we left a voicemail, they were able to call back and see that. They actually got login information on the phone to be able to access their accounts online to go in and manually place that trade and do, potentially get to and do the distribution. So, the client was actually very compromised, where, they weren't even necessarily getting the phone calls that we were sending out to them and calling to, and they were getting intercepted. So, I never had seen that before or been through a situation where the entire phone had been compromised, where the calls were going to, and being intercepted by the fraudster themselves. But, it goes to show, how some of these processes that were put in place are there for a reason. And boy, when you have to lean on them and use them, it's very, very thankful. So you go back to some of the statistics that family could have been a part of that. One of those, statistics where the fraudsters had just gone in and, updated banking information and sent it to their account or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So,
if you combine that with, not pronouncing the last name correctly, or if they were using some of this AI technology, like you were talking about, where you can clone voices and all that kind of stuff, that just makes that even harder to detect these things.
Oh, it does. Well, and I would say our relationship with that family really helped us in this scenario, right? Be able to catch it. And two, for the families that we work with, a lot of times we know their financial goals. We know expected distributions. We know what the game plan is for the year. So
this would have been part of a discussion. Yeah.
A lot of times, right? Not that it's not uncommon. Hey, things come up, right? Not everything could be planned for, but we got a heightened sense of security when something outside the norm kind of gets popped up like this, when there's a pretty sizable distribution being requested and some of those other red flags were popping up, right? So we were really happy with the team and the way that they kind of responded and caught this. And, we were really able and fortunate to, be able to kind of protect the client from the attack that they got. So of course, when we think about like today in the podcast, that story, kind of prompted it. And then now we want to kind of just touch on and figured it'd be helpful to just, hey, let's outline some of these common threats, some of the precautions that you can take, as you're kind of looking at your own situation, to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to kind of make sure that this doesn't happen to you, because it is extremely, extremely common. Like I said before, we have what I would call I don't want to say like a light threat, but occurrences happen all the time.
Sure.
Nothing quite to this degree, where they had taken someone's phone and made a call to us and requested the distribution. Not quite like to this degree, but certainly where passwords or sensitive information had been leaked in a breach or something like that, to where some of these other scams.
Just look at the number of calls and
somebody.
texts you're getting. Is the opportunities are there every single day. So only a few of those need to grow into an issue to then become a problem.
Yeah, well, those are probably the most common ones, right? I mean, if we if we were just kind of listing out and saying, hey, what are the big ones that you need to be kind of aware of? The phishing emails and the texts are certainly what we're getting inundated with on a day in and day out basis, or at least it feels that way from me. We were joking, that Easy Pass text. I don't know how many times I've gotten, hey, you haven't paid your Easy Pass bill. Get on and log on and pay it by clicking this link or call us, right? I mean, it got me so much where I was like, oh, wait, am I behind? Like, did my card fall off? I had to, again, best practice, certainly going online, doing a quick search and, right there, first thing that comes up, hey, Easy Pass scam. I think that's, a lot of these, which is good. A lot of them get reported and, are out there to where if you're ever at a, hey, this doesn't feel right or doesn't seem right, doing a quick search a lot of times can pull it up. The tech support scams were not something that I were as aware of, but certainly when we get back into the data and look at that big, $3 billion number in 23 that was due to fraud, the tech support scams were a big piece of that as well. Fake alerts saying your account or device was compromised, click this link and, go from there. That was a big one, that I wasn't as aware of and don't maybe get as much in my face. But
we've tried to spread the word in my family. I'm known as the IT guy in the family, even though I'm not an actual IT guy, but I know enough to be dangerous, I guess, to help people. I'm every time you go visit mom and dad or the in-laws, it's the internet's been weird lately. Can you fix this? Or, I have my inbox is so full. Can you help me cull it down? Little things like that.
Yes.
But I'm happy to do that role because I've told everybody, don't ever hire an outside third-party remote consultant to fix your computer at this point. You don't need that. You've got someone in the family that can help you with that. So don't even we're not going to fall victim to that one.
Clearly a big risk, right? When you look at it, for sure. Well, and another one that surprised me too, not only the tech support, but the romance scam or imposter scams. And getting those texts, hey, it's a family member. Hey, this is so and so. I'm in trouble. Buy me a gift card or do this, right?
Well, think about it. It sparks urgency and emotion, so it gets people off guard and away from making thoughtful decisions. And
sure. Yeah, no, I didn't really think about the emotional side of it, but certainly they're definitely appealing to that emotional side, trying to help out a family member or a friend, for sure. Yeah. And then the other one that was mentioned through the data and kind of looking back through that FBI report I mentioned earlier was, account takeover attempts, which is kind of what I would categorize the story that we shared, where, the fraudster was truly just inside accounts, had login information, and was trying to physically just, pull the money out of the account themselves, as opposed to the, hey, wire us this, or hey, buy us a gift card and send it here, or some of the other, I guess more typical ones that I'd run into. So be on the lookout for those phishing emails and text. Obviously, I'm sure most listeners will be like, I get inundated with them. Tech support scams, romance scams, and then of course the account takeover were the big ones, from 2023 that were there. And obviously the risks, I don't know if we need to dive into them. They're probably pretty clear, right? But, online access to your investment accounts, that's a big deal, especially if that online access gives you, distribution capabilities or, changes to the accounts. Now, a lot of times, like for custodians and things like that, you think back to that prior situation where the client had called in and said they're going to give us updated banking information. A lot of companies like ours and big custodians in the industry, they have their security around that too. So if you're going update, banking information, a lot of times that requires two-factor authentication, or that requires a wet signature, or that requires a 5-day hold. So that way they can mail you something saying, hey, the account was updated. So, a lot of, if you don't know, certainly talk to your financial advisor or your custodian, and they'll tell you some of those practices that are in place. So that way, if someone does get your login information, hopefully there's like a second round of protection there for you. So that way they just can't log on, update banking information, and then send cash out.
You see how vulnerable your client became with losing the actual phone, because it then kind of neutered all of those other, second factor authentication things and all that kind of protection.
It did, yeah. We think that maybe they, I guess, somehow got their SIM card out of there. So, that was a big deal from that standpoint. But not only access to your accounts, but banking, bill pay is another big one. Certainly some of the big things that you do online as you think about retirement, like applying for Social Security, and your banking information being on there and login or benefit.
I didn't even think about the Social Security one, like redirecting funds from something like that.
You got it. Yep. And it seemed like that a lot of times the initial getting access to this certainly comes through email links and clicking on those phishing emails, where, the fraudsters are trying to get your email contact information. Because you think a lot of times that's where your two-factor authentication goes, or, getting access to that email kind of opens up the door to quite a bit else. So
before you move into, talking about protection, I just want to highlight too, don't just think about this internally just for yourself, because a lot of us might have that bravado. I think I do, to be like, oh, I'll spot these things. I'm not that vulnerable to this. But when I saw my grandfather a couple of years ago, who's a very smart guy, but moving more into that vulnerable population, it was an eye opener, and be like, wow, okay, this isn't just me. This is family members. This is loved ones who are vulnerable to this. I can play a role in trying to help them, or combat this in some way to help save them from this heartache. So hopefully people can view it from that, not just us, self view here, but maybe as your whole family or your loved ones, and you gaining this knowledge could help them eventually.
Oh, absolutely. And can I double down on that aspect of it can happen to anyone. Where these have come up in the past, these individuals were sharp with it, and just happen to fall victim to a particular scam for, whatever reason, but it isn't always like a dementia case or, something to where, is lost sight of. Right. So it can truly impact any one of us. For sure.
I had a family member call a couple of months ago. I won't throw the specific family member under the bus. But this was part of it was the family member said, I think I messed up. And I'm embarrassed to even, there was a level of embarrassment to even then call and be like, can you look at this and see if I mess something up here? And I was like, well, first of all, don't be embarrassed. And don't feel free to double check. And we looked at it, and sure enough, and the family member was like, feel so dumb now, but in the moment it felt fine. And I was distracted and I did it. But if that person hadn't have reached out, they might've just let things float, and then they could have been taken further advantage. Instead, we spotted it. They immediately were able to close things down, get it switched and fixed, and nothing happened. Right. But they had accidentally, just in a distracted moment, pulled that trigger. But please, let's get rid of the stigma of being embarrassed if you do fall for one of these things.
100%. More than a few times over the last handful of years, that's happened. Yep. And every time we go back to that, thankful, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad it was brought up and shared. So, I agree. 100%.
See, what's the old counterterrorism? If you see something, say something like that.
If you see something, say something. Yes, I like that. We'll build that in but a lot of the training that we do on that says exactly the same thing. Bring it up, talk about it for sure. So best practice as well, right? So what can we do? What do we need to be thinking of to, basically try to, avoid this situation happen to you? So of course, the first one here is okay, duh, but strong, unique passwords on every financial site. Over the years, I've been a culprit of this and has since changed. I was the similar password, changing the number at the end and maybe going. Yep. Since more than a handful of years ago, I've kind of broke that bad habit. And one of the good things that's helped me break that bad habit was actually using a password manager. So I used to kind of have a little bit of an issue with the password manager because I was like, well, what if someone gets that one password?
What if they get that one? Yeah.
Right. But then you start kind of putting it in the context of okay, well, one, with the password manager, you two-factor authentication, you could set up extra security in place on that particular password and that access to certainly protect that and going in there. But then also too, you think about the next level of protection where if you're on a different IP address or it's trying to access any one of those logins from a different thing, you're going to get something. Because if you have that two-factor authentication set up, it's going to be there in a protection for you from there.
It can get a little annoying, but when you realize it's protecting you pretty good, it's just go through the annoyance.
The biggest security mistakes are reusing the same password and using easily guessable passwords, and it does solve those. You start looking at some of the passwords that are generated from this thing.
I suggest this password. No one's guessing that,
and I'm forgetting it if it's not saved in here, right? So there's no way I'm going to remember.
No rhyme or reason to it.
But it does solve the two biggest culprits. And then you think about best two-factor authentication on that and the login to get there. I was like, okay, I got over it. And certainly now I think I'm quite a bit more secure than what I was back, some time ago.
Did you see the thing on Twitter or X not too long ago, literally just a week or two ago? And it had, maybe from one of these breaches, someone actually then aggregated what everyone's PIN number was and they put it in this special graph. And then you could see these high density areas pop up and they were all for 4321, 1234. 50% of people repeat the same two numbers instead of picking four unique numbers. Sure. very clear patterns like that. It's like, yeah, we're still, even in 2025, we have people doing 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah, there's got to be some rhyme to be able to remember it, right? And easy and coming across. So, I mean, we certainly can fall victim to it for sure.
If you're watching and you're 1, 2, 3, 4, please, if nothing else from today's episode, go fix that problem, right?
Yes. Agreed. But I've said it a couple times now, but it came up in the last one, but the enable two-factor authentication, which is big, right? And some of my logins, I actually have it on every single one of them. And I have it even where it doesn't even remember my IP, where I got to do it each time when I log in. Bit of a pain, but certainly there to make sure there's that extra layer of security for sure.
I kind of like the text one, but now they're even doing that authentication app, right?
Yes.
Some other third-party thing.
Authy, there's the VIP one. There's a few different ones that are kind of that we've used or we use in the past to access certain things to kind of add additional, where it kind of like the code changes every 30 seconds or whatever. I'm sure listeners have run into that through their work or job or whatever the case is. But those are great. Another thing you could look into would be freezing your credit reports. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, which would prevent fraudsters from kind of opening up new accounts in your name. Now, of course, there's some things to be mindful of if you go to that level, right? You're not going to be able to open up accounts or apply for new credit or anything like that. So you would need to go to, anytime you're transacting business in that way, you're going to have to go to each of the three, unfreeze it. You can do a temporary unfreeze. So that way you can work to open up, whatever account or get financing or whatever the case is from there. So it does add some extra work, but it is a way to kind of ensure that, individuals aren't opening up credit cards in your name or whatever. If you don't have your credit reports frozen, you certainly just identity monitoring or identity theft monitoring, is I think a good practice. Whether it's once a month getting on, to a website like Credit Karma or one of the free ones or whatever, where you're just kind of checking your credit report, looking at the accounts that are out there, just making sure there's no errors in it. Certainly
sometimes your bank will even do that for I think our bank, we get some monthly report or alert of like not only scores, but reports and things like that.
Do they put it on your statement too? Like your credit like the score itself, or is it just like the alerts on any changes?
Both.
Okay, both. All right.
So we actually get a score, and then the reports.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, and then it kind of takes a lot of that where you have to get on. So that's great. If you have something like that, I think that's a great thing. Anything that's just kind of like periodically checking. To kind of take it one step further, you could. There certainly are now identity theft monitoring just companies, right? That'll go in like an Aurora or a LifeLock. That'll you pay them a certain amount annually or monthly to go in and be doing that for you as well. Certainly that can be a fine option. And I think there's even some where there's different levels of help that you can get if you are, you happen to go through a fraud situation, and maybe you could have some protection or some representation,
or even insurance based off of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can kind of take it as far as you want, but certainly, whether you're doing it, whether you have a company doing it, those are all great ideas as you're kind of thinking about just the protections to kind of put in place. There's even some tools too where you can pop your emails online and they'll search to see if it's been compromised. There's a multitude of them out there. You can just run a search and,
Google is constantly telling me I have lots of compromised passwords.
Is it? Well, it's even built in. So our password manager, it's kind of built in. So like when I first got on there, granted, I started putting them in. They're like, oh, that one's compromised. That one's compromised. Hey, that one you should probably change. So it kind of makes it right in your face. Hey, you need to take a look at these ones and go in and adjust them.
It's my pets.com account. I'm not worried about that one,
Yes. Mine's always associated with my old Hotmail email address.
Nice.
I'm dating myself with Hotmail. But if you get my Hotmail email address, you know that you're not getting the Prime email access. That's for sure.
That's right. That password was several iterations ago of Tyler 123 exclamation point.
Not the truth. But all those are great, right? So identity monitoring, freezing your credit, two-factor authentication, maybe a password manager. These are all things that I would kind of keep in mind as you're just trying to think about just how you're using your password, how you're accessing your accounts, and what protections you have in place. Now, of course, if something happens or you think you're subject to being like scammed in any way, shape, or form, it's always a good idea to be changing those passwords. Certainly reset that two-factor authentication. You can contact, if it's with your investment accounts, contact your financial advisor, contact your bank, contact your custodian where your accounts are held. These are all great processes or great things to be doing if you are subject to a fraud situation, to let those custodians know. And a lot of times your advisor, your custodian where your assets are held can put, short-term freezes on the account or an extra security step for distributions or something to that effect for a period of time to kind of make sure and ensure that you're, maybe even a little bit more protected from there. Of course, freezing your credit if you haven't done that and you're subject to scam, going in and doing that. And the final recommendation would be if it's a scam, you can always report it to the FTC, right? I think it's called identitytheft.gov is the website that you can go to kind of report that stuff as well. So all things to kind of keep in mind if you are subject to a fraud situation for sure.
What would your life look like if you designed it around your true wealth? It's a powerful question, and one that True Wealth Design helps individuals, families, and business owners answer every day. With a fully integrated approach to financial planning, tax strategy, investments, and business advisory, their team can bring clarity and confidence to every part of your financial life. Take the first step toward a stronger financial future with a no-cost, no-obligation discovery meeting. Just click the link in today's show description to get started.
Yeah, all very helpful. Love covering some of these examples of where people can take some action here, Tyler. Hopefully preventative, but also good to know some of the steps in case we do fall victim to this. We had our computers and tablets and phones all stolen a week before we closed on our first house several years ago. Wow. And so kind of went through a lot of these issues. Luckily, I guess things were, back then were a little less connected than they are now. But I remember going through that routine of not only now having to deal with replacing that kind of stuff, and those are the purchases you want to be making right before you move into a house with that expense, but also calling banks and changing passwords and just figuring all that stuff out. It can be very stressful.
It can. Yep. But definitely worth the steps, right? To protect yourself and just kind of making sure that you're got everything buttoned up. And, as you think about, if you're listening and you're a client of True Wealth Design, know that certainly we, take your security and cybersecurity very serious and have processes in place. We can certainly talk to you about those when you come in for your meetings if you'd like to. We're even implementing the option of, what we call like a safe word, where we can put basically a safe word for any type of distribution request. So when we are calling to verify that distribution, instead of like your typical verifications like date of birth or social security, think back to the story we talked about today where they had our clients' information, date of birth, social security information. The safe word would be kind of completely separate from anything that would be personally identifiable to you, and kind of would add a layer of protection on there. So that could be implemented. And certainly, we could go as far as even a trusted contact, which I think is a, great process as well. With trusted contacts is basically just someone that you would authorize True Wealth Design, your financial advisor to call if we suspected, something was going on from a cybersecurity standpoint or your well-being or whatever the case is. So that safe word and trusted contacts are two kind of additional layers of protection that can be added as you think about working with True Wealth Design that, can really, I think, help. I certainly helped in the story that we talked about, earlier today. So feel free to bring that up as you're talking.
Make it something obscure, right? Like what did, settle on it beforehand, but what did, if this was familial, like with your, I think this is great to do with your relationships to prevent from those like grandmother in jail type conversations. But
correct. Yeah.
What did I give you on your 16th birthday or something like that?
Or whatever. Yep. Absolutely. Just make sure it's not like public record. It's not something that's data that could be tied or something like that. Certainly something, out of the blue.
Your favorite football team and you have your favorite.
I was going to say ice cream, football, ice cream,
media.
Whatever. Come on. It can be anything. Yeah, no, but all good. So, keep that in mind. I think this is all good things to keep in mind as you're thinking about just protecting yourself and your accounts.
Well, it's really helpful. I thank you, Tyler, for bringing all these things up and walking us through this. I know that this is not one of those nitty and gritty episodes where we get into the planning and the investments we're talking about and the all retirement stuff. But you know what? None of that matters if we then don't have protections in place. And if all of this crumbles down, it undoes all that other hard work. So this needs to be central. It needs to be talked about.
No, absolutely. I agree.
So If you have not walked through this kind of planning before, again, we often talk about the finances, the numbers, but if you're planning and you don't have a cybersecurity plan or are working with an advisor and you don't have some of these safety nets in place to handle an issue like this in case you're a victim or a target of fraud or spam or something like that. Hopefully this raises some eyebrows today and gets you to take action on fixing that problem. If you're looking for an advisor to work with, you've got a great team at True Wealth Design. You can listen to past episodes of the podcast or watch them here on YouTube for more information about what it's like to work with Tyler, Kevin Kroski, and the rest of the great team at True Wealth Design. If you'd like to schedule a visit with the team, you can do that very easily. They like to start off with a 20-minute conversation, a discovery visit with an experienced financial advisor on the team. To book that, all you have to do is go to truewealthdesign.com, click on the Let's Talk button, and you can schedule that time to visit. Again, just go to True Wealth Design. That's linked in the description of today's episode, and then just click the Let's Talk button when you get there. Schedule your time to meet and see if you're a good fit to work with one another. As you're watching today's episode, perhaps on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button and also share this with other people that may find it useful. Hit the bell notification if you want to be alerted to future episodes as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share this with folks who might find it helpful. Maybe someone else in your family could benefit from this information as well. Tyler, thanks for the help. We'll talk to you again soon.
Oh yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.
Information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accurateness and completeness cannot be guaranteed. All performance reference is historical and not an indication of future results. Benchmark indices are hypothetical and do not include any investment fees.